Can I ask you a question? How does this sound to you? Odd, ignorant, unintelligent, unfamiliar? This pronunciation is actually quite common, especially among African Americans.
Let me ask you something.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
You need to ask me my permission before you speak.
It's not that Black Americans can't physically say ask. After all, they say flask, mask, task, and they say basketball, not basketball. And all these words have the same ASK structure, so it must be something else. First, let's see how ask came about in the first place. If we go way back from 1450 to 1100 AD, in Old English, the word ask was asking, derived from the Proto-Germanic askona. I hope to God I'm pronouncing these things well. Anyway, from 1100 to 1500 AD, during the Middle English era, the word asking evolved into asken and even accent. Now we're starting to see the transformation of the word. Around this period, in the very first complete English Bible, the Coverdale Bible, written by the Bishop of Exeter, Miles Coverdale, we find multiple verses with the word ask and its third person singular, asketh. The most famous occurrence being in Matthew 7:7, ask, and it shall be given to you. We also see English author Geoffrey Chaucer using different versions of the word throughout his work. He uses the infinitive version, ax, which is the most common. He uses accent in the plural form with the first and second person, we and ye. He uses the third person singular, axer, the past tense, axed, the ing form, accent, and the second person singular, axest. But here is one thing to notice. He also uses ask in his work. Here is one example word he uses both versions in the same sentence. From 1500 to 1800 AD, modern English was on its early stage, so a bunch of things happened for English and languages in general. We had the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century. This allowed the easy distribution of written materials like books, pamphlets, and newspapers. At this time, we also had the great vowel shift, which was a messy process. Some long vowels moved towards the front of the mouth, resulting in a higher sound. Some vowels that were originally short became long vowels. Some long vowels became diphthongs, gliding from one position to another within a single syllable. This was also a time of expansion and colonization in Africa, Asia, North America, and the Caribbean. And with the works of people like William Shakespeare, John Milton, and documents like the King James Bible, early modern English really established itself. Fast forward to the 1800s, the word ask persisted and became mainstream, and we only hear ask in some dialects like the AAVE. But put aside the historical background of the word ask, you do realize that ask is just a letter switch, right? Which happens all the time across all languages. In fact, we have a name for it. It's called metathesis. Metathesis is from the Latin metatitheni, which means to transpose or change the position. It's composed of two words, meta, meaning change, and titheni, meaning to place. Simply put, metathesis is a change in the order of the letters within a word that results in a change of sound. But the change of sounds is what matters here, because if you notice, the spelling of the word will not change just because some speakers pronounce it differently. So in English, we might hear people say cavalry instead of cavalry, foliage instead of foliage, purdy instead of pretty. And what about these ones? Instead of nuclear, people say nucular because we're more used to words like binocular and molecular. Instead of prescription, people say prescription. Sometimes they might say introduce for introduce, but they might switch comfortable for comfortable and jewelry for jewelry. So why are we cool with these and not maybe the only obvious case of metathesis that Black people use? As I said, metathesis happens with word translation across languages as well, like in the case of the Latin word parabola and its Spanish counterpart palabra. We can see a similar sound change in the French moustique for the English word mosquito, and also the word crocodile, which is translated in Spanish as cocodrilo. Speaking of sound switch, sometimes people even do it for fun, and it's called spoonerism. So you will see people do that with memes using Bo Jiden instead of Joe Biden, Ocean Bupuro instead of Ben Shapiro, just for the sake of satire. So it's not odd, ignorant, or unintelligent to use ask instead of ask. It's just languages at work.